Today we're going to restore an old radio, an old table radio. I picked one up. This is an old Zenith table radio, and it's in restorable condition. It's rough, but restorable. Okay, let's look at it more closely. Now, when you're looking at radios at junk stores and stuff like that, having a back on it is a good sign. It means that quite likely nobody has messed with it. Well, the worst radios to get hold of are ones that somebody else has worked on. Okay, other than that, look for knobs. Make sure it's got knobs. Finding knobs sometimes can be really difficult. I mean, there are places you can get them, but sometimes you can't find the exact knobs that go on the radio. Another thing, very important to look at the dial. If the dial is all faded out and illegible, then you're going to have a lot of work to do to restore it. If it's got a good dial on it, then it's going to be pretty easy. Okay, then look at the cabinet. It doesn't matter what the finish looks like. The main thing to look at is the veneer itself. Okay, this one is all in good shape. There's no places where the veneer is peeling off. If it's got peeling off veneer, that adds a lot more to the work. You can just leave it peeling off and just trim it and glue it down a little bit, but that is kind of an amateur way. If you want the radio to really look pristine, you're going to have to repair peeling veneer, and that's a real big job. So this one here has tight veneer everywhere. It has all parts present, and from what I can see, nobody's messed with it. Okay, let's open the radio up and take a look on the inside. Okay, the cord is no good. Cut that off right away. Got a nice old-fashioned plug here. We'll save that. Cord itself, never save the cord. The stuff is rotten. Throw it away. Alright, let's just pull the back off of it. Now we want a little cup, and we'll save our screws because that's about the first thing that happens is they get knocked off on the floor and lost. Alright, set the back side, and here's the inside. We have the loop antenna, and everything looks good inside. Alright, next thing we'll do is we'll pull the knobs off. Okay, they're pretty tight. Let me show you the trick to get the knobs off. We take a rag and we work it behind the knob. See if we can get the edge of this. Okay, and we just pull. You can get hold of it that way without ripping it up. If you try prying it with a screwdriver or something, you're going to break them. Just get that rag and wrap it around behind the knob, grab the whole rag, and then just pull straight out. Now, of course, look at the knob carefully beforehand. Make sure there's no set screws. Some knobs have set screws, and that can give you a little complication there. All right, got two screws in the bottom. Okay, now we can just grab this, slide it out. Okay, and there's our chassis. Okay, we're going to set the box aside and we'll do it last. Okay, this is a standard, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, this is a 6-tuber. This is a little bit more modern than some of them. Some of them are 5 tubes. This one's 6 tubes. It's got a little miniature tube down in there that they use in the tuner. It was something they did in some of the more modern ones. If we look at the inside, though, we see that the components are old-fashioned. These are the old dog bone type resistors that came out in the 30s and 40s. So they were still cleaning up the stock of those old junk resistors. By just looking at this, I can see nobody has touched it. It's completely original. So what we'll do is we're going to measure each capacitor, and if the capacitor is good, we're going to leave it in there because it's nice to leave it as original as we can. If the capacitor is bad, we'll replace it, of course. All right, let's move it to the electronics area. Now, To test capacitors, we're going to use a standard analog meter. Digital meters have, unless you get an expensive 5-digit one, they have a maximum ohms range of 20 megohms. 20 megohms is going to be too low to test a capacitor. You can have 21 megohms, it'll read good on the digital meter, and that'll be enough to make the radio malfunction. So an analog meter like this, the very top of the scale, you can see it just barely move, and that'll be 100 megohms. So if we see any movement at all on this meter with the capacitor, then we're going to call it bad, leaky, and we're going to replace it. Now some of the capacitors are in areas where a little leakage like that won't hurt, but when you have certain areas like the coupling capacitor to the audio output stage, if you have leakage, you can have that tube overheat, and it'll distort the sound, plus it'll wear the tube out prematurely. So we don't want to have any leakage in that capacitor for sure. Alright, let's just take our first one here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take and cut the lead. We have to have one side loose so that we don't get any leakage through the rest of the circuit. We'll set it on the highest ohm scale, R times 100K, and I'm going to connect it across the capacitor. Okay? See, we get absolutely no reading on the top. When we charge the capacitor up, we see it bounce over, and then it comes back to 100 megohms or greater. See there? We get no movement at all. So that capacitor is okay. Now what you do in that case, take a Sharpie pen and write OK and the date, 2015. Okay, and that shows anybody that works on this radio that you have tested that capacitor, and it was good on 2015. Okay, now we're going to solder this one back in. Okay, we're just going to tin up the leads. I'm going to burn my finger here. Alright, that's one capacitor. Alright, we got another one here. Let's see, that's a little paper capacitor. Alright, looks up there at 50 megohms, which is completely satisfactory. Alright, so we're going to save that one. You can solder with a soldering iron. If you're going to solder a radio with a soldering iron, get you a 40 watt or larger. A 60 watt is even better. The best is a good old soldering gun. This is 140 watt soldering gun. And it'll heat the terminal fast enough to where you don't have to overheat it to get your components to stick. Now if you get too small of an iron, you're sitting there with it on there for so long trying to get it heated that it just fries the components. Okay, let's take the next one. Alright, there we go. Completely good. Alright. Some people will just arbitrarily change out all the capacitor, just saying, well, you know, they're 50, 60 years old, they're going to go bad. But my own feeling on that is if they've lasted 60 years, they're pretty good and sealed. Now, if they're leaking, then you're sure right, they're going to go bad. So if they are leaking, you want to just get rid of them. But these are all, these capacitors are okay, so we're going to leave them in there. Alright, here we got another one. We just cut that loose. Okay, that one's about 50 megohms. And we'll look where it is. Okay, that's in a pretty critical place there. It's an audio coupling capacitor. I don't think I'm going to leave that one in there. I'm going to go in there. Okay, this is a 0.01. So I'm going to cut that one out of there and replace it. You know, it would probably work, but it is a coupling capacitor on the first audio stage. So if we have leakage there, it's going to put a little bit of DC on that grid, and that can cause distortion. Okay, we'll go in there. Of course, this disc ceramic capacitor is a little bit anachronistic, but we're not going to fuss about it. I could go and find a paper tubular in the box of saved paper tubular good capacitors, but this radio is not anything special for me, so I'm just going to use any old capacitor in here. Alright, that takes care of all of that half the radio. We've got 1, 2, 3 more. Absolutely okay. No problem at all with that one. I think we're going to be okay on this radio. Alright, here we got a leaker. Look at that one. See, that one there has had stress on it. And we're down to about 5 megohms. That's, it's not really bad, but it's not really good either. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to cut that out of there. Alright, that is, and so it's an 05 at 200. We'll go ahead and we'll put one of those in there. Now for those, we got little modern capacitors. You get these for about 20 cents a piece at Mouser Electronics. You get 400 volt units. A bunch of different manufacturers make them, and you can find them anywhere from about 20 cents each in quantities of 100. In single quantities, if you're just going to buy a handful of them, they're going to cost you a little bit more, but when you buy them like I do in quantities of 100, you get them for about 20 cents a piece. Put the capacitors in there. Make sure you don't get them touching anything that they weren't touching originally, or you will have some trouble. There's another leaky one. That's another 05. So wherever they bought those 05s, they were some junky capacitors. Alright. That takes care of all of the capacitors. Okay, the next thing we have to do, we need to replace the line cord. Alright, I'll go get a brand new line cord and we'll put it on there. Now, when we put a line cord in, we've got an interesting thing here. We have the hot and the common. Hot is AC hot, the hot part of the line, and common is the one that's equal to ground. We would like the chassis part of the radio to be the ground part. Almost always, the switch part is the ground part. Now we're going to see. All right. And it is in this case too. Okay, we can tell ground by looking at the circuit, and the bottom of the volume control is always ground, or it's going to pretty much likely be ground. And we see that when the switch is turned on, it's connected to the bottom of the volume control. Therefore, ground is going to be the one that goes to the switch. When we look at the plug, we see we have a wide blade and a narrow blade. The wide blade is the ground one, and on these cords, it's the one that has the little ribs on the wire. You look on the other side, there's no ribs. That's going to be the hot one. Okay, so we're going to put the ribbed one. That's the same way they got it here. I don't know if that's common practice or not. I would not bet on it. It's always better to be sure by checking it. Okay. Okay, now there's the hot right there. Just leave that on there because we don't want to lose where it goes. Ground we know goes to the switch, so we'll cut that off and get rid of it. Okay, now we're going to put the new one in through the same holes. Okay, we need enough wire to get over to there. Alright, that's going to do it. Just run the wires through the same holes they were in when they where the old one came from. Okay, and they had a knot tied in it to okay, see, and that secures the cable, the wire. Okay, now we'll just take that, put a little solder in the wire, and solder it to the switch. Okay, and push that over in the back like the other one was. Now, this one here is the hot. Okay, that goes to that one. That's that bottom pin there. We'll remember that. Okay, we'll take that and throw it away. Now, before I forget, got that, strip it, put it to the bottom pin. Okay. Alright, that gets a new line cord, but we're not ready to plug it in yet. We got one more thing to do. That's this nasty thing here. That is our filter capacitor. Okay, now to change that out, it's a 3-section I can see. What we have to do is determine which ones have the high voltage. If we look on the case, it'll tell us. Okay. Oh, all three of them. All three of them are 150 volt. 20, and a 40 at 150. Okay, so that simplifies things. It means we don't have to trace any wiring out. We know that all three of them need to be 150 volt capacitors. Alright, let me find some. Okay, now we can see how modern capacitors are. These 3 capacitors here replace that big thing. Isn't that amazing? You know, this got virtually the same capacitance, and yet they're so much smaller. Okay, you can get these at Mouser Electronics. They're, you know, about 50 cents a piece. Okay, I got 33 and 22. That's 20, and 40 is what the original. We're going to go 22, 22, and 33. The values of the capacitors are not critical. You know, anything in the ballpark. Larger is better, but if you don't have ones as big as the original, yeah, put in whatever you got. It'll work. I wouldn't go from a 40 down to a 10, but if you went from 22 to a 10, it's pretty likely that it'll work. Now, never just parallel up the new capacitor with the old one, because that leaves the old guts in there. That sucker will start leaking and heat up, and then bam, it'll make a big bang when it gets so hot that it boils water in it. So what you do, take a pair of sharp cutters and go down in there, cut that terminal off, leave all the wires on it, cut the terminal off, okay? Leave all the wires on the terminal, but just cut it off right at the capacitor. Okay, that's 2 of them. That's 3. Okay, that gets us our 3 capacitors disconnected. Each of these we have to connect the others too. Okay, now I'm going to look at this. The square one is the big one. Okay, so square, they have little triangle on one, they have a square on the other one, and they have nothing on the last one. Okay, so the square one is this one right here, so we're going to put the 33 on that one. Now, the common goes to the terminal that is the case of the can. Now that you could leave connected up because it's okay. As long as you only have one terminal hooked up, it's not going to have any current flowing through it, so it won't heat up. So we'll get down in here and we'll get us some solder on the terminal. And we're going to take our 33. Okay, on these, it's marked minus. That usually the one with a band is the minus. Okay, that's the one that goes to the can. Make sure you put it in the correct way or you'll get a bang. It'll, oh my goodness, you hook them up backwards, they will heat up in no time. Big bang. These things go off like firecrackers when they get overheated. They get hot inside, it boils the electrolyte. The electrolyte gets hot and turns into steam and it builds pressure up and bang, it'll blow the case open. Alright, then we'll take the positive one and connect it to there. Okay, see, that's just neat as can be. Now, the other 2 are 22s. Alright, I'm going to just reach down in there and solder that one on there too. Alright. Make sure nothing's going to touch anything that it isn't supposed to. Alright, that's all real nice and solid. The capacitors hold the wires in place, so you don't have to worry. Alright, now that takes care of all the capacitors in the radio. We got the whole radio recapped. Alright, let's shoot the juice to it and see what happens. Alright, here goes. Turn on the bench supply, and there she goes. I can see the tubes are lighting up. Now there's a watt meter on the bench over here, and it's showing the number of watts that it's pulling, and it's pulling about 15 watts, which is what it should. Okay, we'll just let her warm up.
RC50, your favorite stations wherever you are. Create custom music stations.
Alright, we got something wrong. Hear that buzzing? Right. Well, I found what the problem is. It is interference. It's coming from the camera. Oh my God. Okay, when I shut the camera off, the noise disappears, so it's coming in through the antenna. The radio is working perfectly. Okay.
In Atlanta that could run by the probate court or an attorney over there that you
see, when you get on a station, it blocks it out.
That could run by the probate court.
Okay, if I move the camera back, every time the camera does a right, I can see the little light blinking on the camera. It makes that buzzing noise in the radio. Isn't that something? Oh well. Okay. But the radio all works now. So we see that it's nothing to go ahead and recap the radio and get it all working.
Let's see, Easton, if you're a Cowboys fan, I think I think you have to root the Eagles.
All right.
Yeah,
Next thing we got to do,
for injuries and ejections.
we've got to get the cabinet looking good. All right, we'll have to move out into the other shop. Okay, now what we're going to want to do, we don't want to get stain on our grill cloth, and we don't want to get it on our little window, and we don't want to get it on here. We'll get it on here, but we're going to do it differently. So we're going to take all that stuff off. All right, we go inside here and we see everything's held in with staples. Take a pair of cutters, grab each staple, pull it out. Don't worry about it, just get them out of there. There. It's our piece of plastic. It comes out, that's part of our grill cloth. Now what we'll do is we'll clean that a little bit. Now this piece of plastic here, or cardboard, is on the inside, so we don't have to worry about it. We'll leave it alone. Okay, now the speaker grill cloth, we do the same thing. Just pull these staples out. And there we go. Okay, now to get your bezel off, they got little tabs on there. Take a pair of pliers, pinch them up. Reach in there and grab each tab and just pinch it. Comes right out of there. Alright, that leaves us the blank cabinet. Okay, save all the pieces, don't lose them. Alright, now we're going to remove the old stain from this. This one here, we're down to bare wood. See, if you're not down to bare wood, you can salvage the stain. But this one here, we're down to bare wood all over the place, so we can't salvage it. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove the stain from it. Alright, I've got nothing but a standard chisel here. There's a woodworking chisel. It's filed down to where it's very sharp. Just take it and drag it along the wood. The stain comes right off. You can do it with chemicals if you want a big mess. This is just as fast. Go with the grain of the wood. Don't go across the grain or you'll ruin it. Go with the grain of the wood. Alright, that's 99% of it. We'll get the rest of it off with sandpaper. Okay, we're going to leave that. That's pretty good. We'll leave it. Now, the front, there's no way we can save it. It's down to bare wood everywhere, so we have to take it off too. Alright. It just takes it off right down to wood without eating into the wood at all. We're keeping the angle such that we're not digging into the wood. We're scraping it along, just ripping the stain right off the surface. Alright. See, it doesn't take much time at all to do it this way. Not much time at all. All right. Okay, that takes care of the front panel. No chemicals, no mess. Okay, now the sides we're not really bad on. I don't know, this side's pretty bad. You're just taking it and you're scraping it off. Comes off really easy. Sharp, sharp chisel. Sharpen it up several times if you have to. Be careful not to drag the corner of the chisel on the wood or you'll scratch it. You can of course do this using solvents if you want to mess. I prefer to keep everything dry. It's just my own personal preference. This doesn't take long. That one looks so good, I'm going to leave it. Okay, now we need some sandpaper. I'm just using 220 grit here. 220 grit sandpaper. Okay. And we're just going to sand it up. See how nice that looks? I mean, just beautiful. And just in a matter of a few minutes. Okay, it's beautiful. Okay, other side. Now this one's the one we didn't strip down. I'm just going to take it and roughen it up. I'm just roughening up the finish that's on there. We're going to leave the original finish on this end. It'll blend in just fine. Has to be rough though. You can't leave it glossy. When you sand, it's best to sand along the grain. Go with the grain rather than across it. Because when you go across it, you put scratches in the wood that difficult to fill. They'll stain a little bit darker than the rest of the wood, and you've got to play with it in order to blend it in. So it's best to sand always with the grain, even though it might be a little more difficult in some positions. Now, don't forget inside the grill cloth area. Okay. That's it. All right, the cabinet is just smooth as could be, just really smooth. Okay, we're down to bare wood on all of it except this one side where we have the original, with the original finish on there. It's a little bit rough, but we're roughening it up just to where we'll blend it in. If the original finish is in good shape over the whole radio, you can do this on the entire radio and you don't have to strip it all the way down. But you can see how easy it is to strip it down. It's really not that difficult at all. Okay, the next thing we're going to do, we have to stain the radio. We want to stain this. I like dark colors myself. You can stain it whatever you like, but I like a dark stain, and I'm going to use a dark walnut. Now, you can put a glove on if you want to keep your fingers from getting stained. You get these throwaway latex gloves at the hardware store. They're about $5 for a box of 10 of them. Okay, just get you a piece of felt and dip it in the stain. Make sure your stain is shaken up good, and we just go for it. Ooh, that's going to look good. Okay. Here's the piece that has the original. See how that blends right in? You can't even tell that we didn't sand it down to bare wood. It just blends right in beautifully. Okay. You don't have to use a dark stain. If you want to use a little bit lighter color, you can use a lighter color. But I like dark because it's more like the original radios were. The original radios all used that tannin stain, which was a fairly dark stain. Go. All right. Okay, go down inside where the grill cloth hole is. Alrighty, that looks good. Did I get all that? Make sure every little square inch is stained. Place there. Down in there. Okay, get a little more. Don't have to worry about in there because it's under the bezel. Alright, that takes care of the whole thing. Alright, there's the panel. Okay. All right, now we're going to take a cloth and we're going to wipe it off. Okay, I'm just taking a piece of cloth and I'm wiping all the wet stain off of it. Okay. Now, we have to let that dry overnight. We don't want to, before we put the lacquer on it, we've got to let it completely dry. So we're going to let that dry overnight and we'll continue on it tomorrow. Alright, our stain is completely dry. It's been overnight. And what we'll do now is we'll spray the cabinet with lacquer. Want to do this on a dry day, which we don't have today. It's a little damp, but it's okay. And preferably a warm day, a day that's like 70 or warmer. So we're right on that. Now we're going to use a mixture of half lacquer and half lacquer thinner. Thin it down, in other words. It's better to put more coats of thin lacquer than 1 or 2 coats of big, thick, heavy lacquer. So use Deft lacquer, the Deft brushing lacquer. You get it at Home Depot or Lowe's, and mix it half and half. Use one of these little cheap sprayers here. They're about $25 over at Harbor Freight. Even less. I've seen them under $20 over there. Use 30 pounds of pressure. Just to get you a nice fog out of it. Alright, let's take it and put it over on the table here. A little bit more. You don't want it to have any tendency to run whatsoever, but it should definitely wet the surface. There we go. Okay, now we're going to let that dry for about 10 minutes and then we'll put another coat. We'll do that for several coats. Alright, that's been about 30 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and put the next coat. We're all dry. Alright, that looks good. Alright, now we'll go ahead and do number 3. See if I can do that. A little easier than picking it up. Alright, that's number 3. Alright, next one. That will do. All right. That looks really good. Okay. That takes care of the lacquering. Now, we have to put the accessories back on. Now, our grill cloths are a little discolored. They're not really bad, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to even them up by just spraying them with a little colored lacquer. This is a dark walnut spray lacquer. If you don't have that, you can do it using the spray gun. I mean, these you can buy, they're expensive, but you know, if you're going to do stuff, you got to spend money. Okay, I'm just going to put a little bit of this on there to even out the color. Okay, it just makes it to where the darkness doesn't show up as much. It'll look very good. Okay. To put this in, we're going to use just plain old heat glue. Alright, got this one here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take some fine steel wool, I'm going to buff it up, and then coat it with a little bit of clear lacquer. Keep it from tarnishing. Alright, this is 4/0 steel wool, and I'm just going to buff this up a little. I'm not going to take the patina off of it. I'm just going to take it and even it out. Okay. That's all we need to do. See, it'll look okay. But this will tarnish, so what I'm going to do, I really don't like that. I'm going to buff that some more. Okay, that still doesn't look really good. I'm going to put a little bit of lacquer on that to darken it up. And this is the spray lacquer. If you don't have spray lacquer, you can just use a little bit of dab on a piece of cloth. Okay. I'm just going to even it out with my finger. Alright, that gets that little shine off of it. I'll put just a little more. Let it dry a little bit. This stuff dries really quick. Okay, now I'm just going to take it and even it out with my finger. Okay, that looks good. Alright, I'm going to just coat that whole thing with clear lacquer. This is just Rust-Oleum clear lacquer. Put just enough on there to coat it. You don't want it to run. Okay? Now, we'll let that dry and then we'll put it together. Alright, now, we'll go ahead and put this together again. Got the little... This is the little plastic thing for the dial light. Now what you want to do is take some steel wool and buff that plastic so that the crud has gotten off it. Otherwise the light won't show through it. Take our pliers and just bend these over. All right. Now, for the dial cloth, the clock, we'll just make sure that's in there the right way. All right. Just skish a bunch of it in there. Stick it in. Same thing. All right, there's our cabinet, ready to go. Piece of plastic has a bad spot in it, but hey, not going to show up that big of a deal. Okay, that looks good. That looks really good. Okay, let's go put the radio in it and we're ready to go. All right, the next thing to do is to put the chassis back in and get this thing buttoned up. Yeah. Okay, and then the back. This one's lucky that it has a back. Some of them don't, and you have to cut it out of a piece of cardboard. No big deal, but it is extra work. And there's our radio. Okay, take our two knobs. Okay. Now it's working. All right, let's plug it in, make sure it works, and then we've got it done. Okay. Since we have the camera on, it's going to have that buzzing in it again.
That marijuana is the preferred tool of homosexual date rapists. It's not just a coincidence that Charles Manson, Joseph Stalin, and Jeffrey Dahmer were all frequent marijuana users. Whoa! All that propaganda terrifies me.
Okay, so we can see that it isn't that hard to go ahead and repair a little table radio. Okay, look how beautiful that turned out. That is just gorgeous. Okay. So we took a radio that was worth about $30 at the junk store, and we turned it into about $150, $200 radio if you were to like list it on eBay. You know, a little Zenith like this goes pretty good. But we're going to keep it. It's a nice little radio. I'm going to keep it in my collection. So, you know, that was nothing to it. Now, we did not have a lot of trouble with this one. There are situations that can occur. An open audio output transformer is pretty common. I mean, that can happen in a radio, and you'll have to find one. Bad volume control switch. You turn the switch on and the power doesn't come on. The switch itself can go bad. A lot of those go bad. Volume control itself can be bad. It'll turn to a certain point and there'll be no sound, and then all of a sudden, bang, the sound comes in very loud. So volume controls go bad. So we didn't have any of those problems with this set here. So we were lucky. But you could have that if you have any of the others. Now, you take another radio that's a different model than this, all the steps are going to be basically the same. You simply take the chassis out, recap it, try it, see if it works. If it doesn't, then go through more stuff and get everything out that doesn't work and replace it. And then take the box and either save the finish on it if you can, or strip it down to bare wood and stain it and lacquer it. And you can just make an old radio into a very nice collectible piece. That's it.